Innovation is key to smart city. In your view, how can innovation be stimulated for a city?
In my opinion, Smart City Initiative is one of the best innovation that could lead local authority, the governments, the public sectors, organization within the city to provide a better and quicker services to their clients or to their people, for example, in most effective way. Um, and this initiative actually will help all these organization in terms of addressing the long-term problems such as the social, economic, the demography, environmental, and technology change that could lead and help them to improve their services. Innovation can help cities to solve all the urban challenge, such as reducing the air pollution and capitalize on the economic benefit of new technology or product that can promote. Drawing inwards investment is often seen as paramount to stimulating innovation in cities, and it is of course beneficial to attract specific firm or industry to build expertise and strengthen networks. In my opinion, innovation is most of the important component in the smart city initiative. It's the key for the successful of such initiative that be implemented by certain of cities. So in this context, yes, I totally agree that innovation is key for each city to become smart as compared those as compared to the other than cities that who are not applying smart city initiative in their urban area, for example. This is because innovation will lead more opportunity, new way of changing the daily problems, because the innovation will lead the solution to the cities, because the city itself is very complex and different as compared to other. So due to that, the smart city initiative promote uh, how the urban governance to solve their urban problems through innovation, through the technologies that may be implemented in daily life.
Smart community is one of smart city components. How does this component being emphasized in current smart city development in Malaysia?
Smart community is one of the smart city components in this initiative. This is one of the very important aspect that need to be handled when we want to implement smart city initiative in our city, because without the community, all the initiative that has been strategized, has been designed in the policy, for example, cannot be delivered successful. In this case, the participation, how the community involved in the whole process of implementing the smart city initiative is very crucial. The biggest question is how the community become smarter than before. Here, the application of technology and new innovation is the key for the successful of each community. involvement of the community in implementation of a smart city initiative is the key of successful to this initiative, because through the empowering of the community, in order to make sure that the whole citizen can taking part in this initiative actively, because they play such a big role as being together with the local authority, for example, as well with the government, to ensure that our city can provide a better living environment with more safe, and with a higher quality of life. Participation of community in order to give feedback, for example, in order to providing data, for example, is part of the how to make sure the community become more smartest. For the smart community, actually involved in many ways. For example, that the community that can provide data. So in this case, in order to provide real-time data, for example, the community must know how to use the application, for example. So in that sense, that's why we can say that the involvement of community in this in implementing the smart city initiative is very important. So they are the people behind the scenes who are practice, who are experiencing all the initiative that has been strategized, and at the end, all the community we receive or experience a better way of life. As for example, in Malaysia context, there are lots of application nowadays that provided by the local authority, by the agencies related to the energy, for example, related to utilities management, that we can use, and at the same time, when they install the application and registered, all the users of energy, for example, or the water consumption, or the utilities that they use, can be recorded by all these provider or operator. So we can see that there are smart city all these smart city services, they are much more directly visible to and impactful on the people in their daily life. So at the end, all the agencies, all the operator can improve their service. For example, in terms of waste management, in terms of providing a better public transportation, urban mobility, improve the health, education service, and so on. That's why I can highlight that the participation of smart community in this initiative is very crucial.
To make informed decision about smart city, big data analytics play significant role. Do you agree, and why?
Yes, big data nowadays play a significant role in managing the cities. In order to implement the smart city initiative, the local authority, for example, need the real-time data. In this context, for example, in Malaysia, the Plan Malaysia, for example, initiate what they call it Malaysian Urban Observatory, MUO. even though in Iskandar, Malaysia, they also have like big data center to collect all the relevant data that could help them to manage, to plan future development within their area. So the big data itself play important roles in this context. Without the data, without the exact and the real-time data, it's quite very difficult to the urban manager or planners to design or to manage how the city will be looks like in the future. In other words, big data play an important role in smart city so that city can process the data from the Internet of Things device, for our phones, for from the smartphone, all the sensors, for example, that installed in the building. The application of big data in the city management, for example, around the world has been promoted and believe that such data could help the urban managers or the local authority in order to manage their cities in better ways, because the data itself provide fact and figures, a pattern how the city should be managed in future. That's why the needs of the local authority need to establish their own big data center, for example, in order to collect all this information, because the big data center, for example, may offer data for researcher or to the planners to access to wide range of data to study urban problems, for example, because it will provide such more meaningful information that could help the urban planners design it specifically to solve the urban problems. With the data, with the exact data and real-time data, for example, we can reduce crime, we can identify the hotspot of crime, for example, we can know where is the exact location that need certain facilities. For example, we can improve the water supply and also energy system. And for example, in Seoul, Korea, South Korea, the government collect lots of data from the public in order to improve their public health, the urban transportation, some bus, train, and all this data available for this to the scientists, to the researcher, and at the end, the researcher giving back to the community by providing a solution, by providing a suggestion from what they have researched, what they have gone through, and analyzing the data that have been collected by the local authority. So it's like a win-win situation. That's why we need to have access to all the data that have been collected.
What can we learn from failed smart city development?
There are lessons that we can learn from the failure smart city development around the world. First, one of the factors that lead the unsuccessful of the smart city initiative was the readiness of the community. Like I said before this, either the community is ready in order to become part of the smart community. Is it the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure related to the Internet of Things, for example, the accessibility of the public to get the Wi-Fi, for example, internet access also play important roles, which if the cities cannot be ensured that cannot be provided with all the basic facilities related to the technology, could lead the situation where we can say that unsuccessful of smart city, because the smart city itself by definition is really depending on the users of technology and also the internet. Technologies, the Internet of Things, all the basic facilities related to it must be prepared before the smart city initiative be introduced or implemented. Another factor that led to the failure of a smart city initiative was lack of clear objective. It is often the case that what smart community project stakeholder hope to achieve has not been clearly identified, state and agree upon it. Clear objectives are must have, because without them, defining what constitutes success or failure or the threshold for scaling and replication is impossible. Without clear objective, the urban manager or the planners may select and apply the wrong construct to the project. If the project purpose is only to test a new technology, then a proof of concept will suffice. There are numbers of this advantage of smart cities initiative implementation. For example, that the first one, a lack of public awareness and social responsibility towards this initiative. Secondly, the building and maintaining the infrastructure related to the smart city is costly and challenging, and there are also very high demands. Number three, there are demands 24 hours daily in terms of our internet connectivity, for example, the uses of energy, the power supply, and also number four, there are also security issues, the privacy issues in terms of gathering public data for the big data center, for example. And even though there's also studies mentioned about the smart cities may lead a way towards of social discrimination.
How do you foresee the smart city development in Malaysia in the next decade?
Smart city development in Malaysia still at early stage. I believe that in future, maybe in next decade, the smart city initiative will be accepted by the local governments, by the companies, by the community, in the next level. Because at this stage, since Putrajaya development has been mentioned that development of Putrajaya was, and even though the Cyberjaya was most one of the, the earliest development that implement the smart city concept, and later on growing up in other big city in Malaysia. We are still at the early stage of this process, but in future I believe that this initiative will be accepted by most of the local authorities, and the community become more ready, since there are lots of new technology coming in. We started looking and explore how the 5G technology, for example, that can be benefit to the society, to the country, to the economy. So I believe that in future, Malaysia could be one of the players that seriously not only have a good policies and guidelines how to implement the smart city, but practice in the real sense to become better, to provide a better living environment to the society, for example. Through smart city, we can move toward in Asia to as the smart city initiative is relatively new in Malaysia, and even the discussion and literature review related to the successful of this initiative has been discussed in several papers and articles, but in next decades, perhaps that there are some progress in terms of how our city in Malaysia actively involve and implement all the initiative. At the national level, since 2015, there are what they call the roadmap of Internet of Things that has been introduced. Even though the Plan Malaysia, for example, also discuss several times on how to implement. There's a there's interest among the public authorities, the city council, to implement this initiative seriously in future. And this initiative have been debated through the time, and I believe that in next decade, the smart city initiative become more comprehensive, become the local authority involved, and even the public also involved in this initiative seriously in next decade. In this context, I believe that smart cities initiative is a next generation approach, or future city approach to manage the urban area with a better solution that can address all the urban issues, and at the same time we can improve the quality of life of urban dwellers. Nowadays, people are asking for a better and effective services from the local authority, for the city council, from the government, in order to get a better services from all these agencies, people are talking about the e-governments. I think now Malaysia looking on it since many years ago. We are looking on digitalization of the system and delivery system. And if you look on the definition of digital governance, they say that it's an application of information technology to the functioning of the government to enhance the delivery of public service. So we are there already. There are apps, there are online payments, now we are slowly looking on the next steps. So we start to collect all the data, and initiate and even the promote to the local authority to set up their own big data center, to gather all the relevant information, and perhaps with all this initiative we can move and step forward in this initiative in future.